not cheap, and it can take a very long time. So instead of waiting and doing it by yourself and taking 3 and 4 years to do it, if we have a CARICOM and an OECS template, it's basically plug and play. So I'm advancing that as something coming out of Cannabliss 2025, that St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that we are calling on CARICOM and on the OECS to see how we can harmonize the framework, the legislative framework for cannabis in the region.
I want to put a question to both Grenada and to Anguilla. In the case of Grenada, you say, this may be considered as a bit of a rough question. You've been in the Royal Grenada Police Force for several decades with a certain approach, and you're on the board. What sort of transition have you personally may have to make to be able to offer solution? Is it that you have to offer a rigid police traditional approach, or is it one where you now are able to look at things from what the goals and the objective of the board will be? And similarly, in terms of for Anguilla, a similar sort of question, that whole transition in terms of previous regimes and the policies and so forth. How do you make that transition, to where you might want to be? Is it still a learning process, or you could go first?
In the Grenada context, we didn't have much difficulties. This topic has been on the full-born in Grenada now for some time. So there has been a lot of sensitization to our population. And let me just go back to the question you asked about being in law enforcement and getting here. I do not know, and I cannot speak for the organizational
grams that you can have in your possession. So we have gotten to that stage. We are pretty late because those who were before us would have gone to jail for the same plant that is created by our Heavenly Father God. So it is just a travesty that it really took so long for us to really get to this point. For us though, transitioning to the next step from a Caribbean perspective, I just would have had the Caribbean Week of Agriculture. And to me, something like this should be tabled as a resolution for the rest of the islands to follow suit. Unfortunately, we may have other technicalities to deal with because we are not an independent country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are still a British overseas territory, so we have additional hurdles that we will need to jump over. But we have no doubt that once the movement in the region continues, we would have more justification on our side to be able to push at the higher level as it relates to having
of medicine, we will agree. If you take it outside of that, then we are not supportive. The policy in St. Vincent and Grenadines was carefully crafted, and we moved swiftly because within a matter of 12 months from seeding the idea, we were in Parliament. And I'm aware that and they are experiencing different hurdles as they advance. What St. Vincent and Grenadines, what we are offering at Cannabliss, what it is working here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And later on in the discussion, we will explain some of the opportunities that we have had here in SVG.
Again, put this to Anguilla. What do you see as being your timelines, right? In terms of this start, how do you foresee going through this process? And is this something that advice is needed on, or you have some set goals and timelines going forward?
We don't have a particular timeline in place. Like I said, we did the first step. The previous administration would have done the first step, I believe, in 2023. And it's naturally gonna take some time. This is the first conference, panel discussion that we are taking part of. So it's gonna take us some more time. I will leave the technical folks to determine as it relates to timeline, policy development, and then to move into the legislative framework of it. Maybe we can put a year, 2 years to see something happen.
Similarly, Grenada, there may have been, I got to say this, there may have been some expectations that Grenada would have already gone through this process. How about your timeline?
Well, we are a little ahead of where my friend is. In fact, we already have drafted a cannabis decriminalization bill, which is currently before our cabinet for consideration. We are hoping that this bill will be tabled in Parliament before the end of 2025. So we might be starting 2026 having the bill passed. That's how far we have gotten. We have done all of the hard work. We have done all of the advising that we could do to Cabinet. Cabinet is now considering what we have submitted to them, and it's up to Cabinet now to take that bill to Parliament so that it can be debated and eventually passed. We have also been involved in some public education, as Mr. Caesar said. Without the public buy-in, we think that stumbling block is going to be great. We are a Christian community in Grenada, and so if we don't have the acceptance and buy-in from our community, that's going to be a hurdle that's going to be too hard for us to climb. So we have started some public education. We are going to continue the public education. We are meeting with different interest groups and different stakeholders so that we can trash out and flesh out all of the issues that remains or concerns and questions that they have. We can answer that to them. So I'm hopeful that the beginning of 2026 might see Grenada having that bill pass into law, and we probably will be well on our way to having cannabis decriminalized and depenalized in Grenada.
If there are any questions from the audience, is there anybody who has any questions for this ministerial panel? We might fit in a question. Stephanie, is Stephanie there? Stephanie, come a minute. Yeah. Yes. I called Stephanie so she could pass you the mic. Yes. Come forward. Yeah. Yeah. Stephanie, you stick around.
A pleasant good afternoon to all, to our esteemed panel. Happy to have you on board and joining in this, I say, much important step forward for Grenada and for Anguilla. Now, I hope that in your processes, you will definitely try to do some apologies, right? I know that you may say back then, marijuana was illegal, but I know in your countries, the Rastafari community and other conscious-minded persons was always advocating for the holistic use of the herb. So for medicinal, for spiritual, for recreational, for whatever purpose some persons may see it, for making rope, etc. So I hope that in this process you would look back and remember the persons who would have struggled, who would have been penalized, because I know our police officer would know how much persons was actually penalized for something that I would say there was never an injured party. So crimes, to me, should always be about an injured party. And most persons smoking marijuana, if it's anybody you're injuring, is yourself, right? So I hope that you would make this bold step and apologize, because you must say in this process there must be reparations, restoration, okay? You must recognize all of the persons who you would have wounded in some way. And I mean wounded because many of us have stories, especially, and I must say, I cannot reiterate it more, the Rastafari community. My sister was just telling me about an incident here in St. Vincent where her daughter dressed in her high school uniform and police officers were passing and stopped and searched that young Rasta girl. She's outside now, a big medical doctor in Trinidad and Tobago, right? And they searched her because Rastafari was always perceived as criminals before anything else. So even her dressed in her high school, which is the top school in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the police officer came out and searched that young girl. And these are things I think you must apologize for, because it was actually hard and very difficult times a lot of the Rastafari persons and traditional farmers went through. So within your process, I think you must definitely look and involve the traditional farmers, make sure they have a stake in it. As there was mentioning, we don't want all the big farmer, the persons with the monies to come in and invest now in Anguilla, who, if there's any left, because according to Sobuto, there's not much persons willing to invest. But if there are any left, make sure that your traditional farmers, your Rastafari community, get a slice, and a very big slice of what is there to be gained. All right? Thank you very much, Sobuto. You're still doing a wonderful job. There's little hiccups here and there, but we'd work on you to make you better. MCA, wonderful job. Conference going well. All right, so Anguilla, make sure, Grenada, I'm holding you. I have some persons in Grenada. My dear friend Allison there, studied in Cuba with me. Hold them accountable, Allison. Make sure that the Rastafari community get what is deserving of them. Thank you very much.
Let me address the Grenada perspective. I cannot speak to apology. That has to be a political decision. But what I can tell you in the Grenada context, that we will be looking at expunging the record of all those who were convicted in the past for the use of marijuana. That is a recommendation made to the cabinet as part of our work, and that is something that is going to happen. And I think you have said it very succinctly, that Rastafari in Grenada has been the advocate over the years for exactly what you have said. And so government intends to reward them by looking at the conviction and expunging the record. I can't speak to the apologies. That has to be on the political side.
I just have two more points that I want to mention, especially coming out of Sister Idisha's comment. And let us give a round of applause again. Well said. There is a need for the Rastafari community within CARICOM to stand united across borders. 2025 can be a platform where we can have a meeting of the minds, because united as a Rastafari community throughout the region, we definitely can advance the cause to deepen our involvement in not only the industry, but the entire cannabis ecosystem. That's one. Secondly, the policymakers in CARICOM and in the OECS, we need to sit at the table and go beyond just the paper. We need to say who will be doing what, when, where, and how. I think we are still juggling a ball that we don't know exactly where it is going to land. And yes, we are at different stages, but if in St. Vincent and the Grenadines there is already a lab, every member state in CARICOM wishing to come into the industry should know that they can get a discounted price if they use that lab and they don't have to go and look for another lab. If there is already a medicinal cannabis authority with trained staff, instead of going and spend $2 and $3 million to get training for your staff, we can, as a part of a memorandum of understanding between ourselves, when you are ready, we can send a member staff from the MCS St. Vincent and Grenadines to you, or by that time Grenada may have a trained staff, St. Lucia may have a trained staff, they can send to you so that you don't have to incur a lot of this cost. The other thing, it is really heart-wrenching to see that some member states of CARICOM are allowing cannabis to come from North America, imported to their countries, and are almost having a closed door to cannabis from other member states with a framework to export. Everyone is silent. Remember, the development of agriculture in the Caribbean has never been done by any country individually. If you go as far back as the Caribbean and the Arawaks, they were hunters and gatherers moving from one island to the next. They depended on more than one. If you look at the banana industry, and I see Bishai is here, the banana industry was built within the Windward Islands on 4 islands coming together, sharing their experiences and using a single boat company, geese. St. Vincent didn't say we're going to use geese. St. Lucia said they're going to use tropical, and next one said they're going to use another company. So there is going to be a time, and I think that time is now, and that's why I'm so happy for Cannabliss 2025. The message must go out that we can't just be inward looking and saying, well, I want to do everything myself, because it is very expensive to set up this industry. Once we work together, once we assess the framework for the division of labor, I am certain that we can benefit and that we can move faster and we can do it in a more synchronized manner. Thank you.
With that, I would like to thank the 2 ministers and the representative from Grenada. Oh, we have another question. Okay, let's take the question and we'll move into the other panel.
Yeah, good afternoon. I listened carefully a while ago to the presentation from Grenada, and the brother was mentioned.
They would have to decide what threshold of forgiveness position to answer that question. Yes, yes. As the minister said, right now there is tolerance for small quantity. But when we're talking about expunging the record, there has to be a benchmark as to how far or how low you're going to go, or what will be the cutoff. 100 pounds as against 10 pounds. That's a political decision that has to be made. Or whether or not everybody is forgiven, that's a decision that the politicians will have to make.
Yes, let me. Okay, we have to move on to the next panel, but let's take that last question. Is it from, you want to come back again, Ransom?
Yes, I just want some clarity in that I'm not talking about what would be accepted as small quantity. The brother's presentation mentioned that there is some tolerance. There is already a precedent set. So there is an identified amount, one could say, that is considered a small quantity. Is that small quantity a spliff? Is it an ounce? Is it a... Some clarity would make some sense at this point. Thanks.
To answer the question and to endorse what my brother from Grenada said, there's a gray area. So it's basically left up to the discretion. All right, so it's a very gray area. Of course, I am comfortable in saying that a spliff will be representative to a reasonable officer as a small quantity. But it is not yet quantified to say what is the exact volume as yet. But very soon, they will be getting to that stage. So the cabinet and the legislators will come to that decision very soon. But right now, it's gray.
Let me just finish this off. From an international point of view, a small quantity is considered to be 56.66 grams. Now in Jamaica, a small quantity is considered 57 grams. In St. Vincent, it's 56 grams. Some other islands have used 30 grams, some 20 grams. But you know, you are able to do whatever figure. Now, I want the person to know 1 ounce is 28 grams. 2 ounces is 56 point something grams. So it's important to know those two figures. 2 ounces is the same as 56 grams. And that is 60 ounces a pound.
I just wanted
So there's a consider to the standard.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood your question, so I think Minister answered the question for me. Now, under the legislation, 56 grams is what's going to be the decriminalized quantity. But currently, because we don't have the legislation yet, is the discretion of the police officer. So we don't have a particular set number. You might get arrested for quarter of an ounce. Somebody else might go free for quarter of an ounce. It all depends on your attitude towards the police at the time that you were encountered. All right? I just thought I wanted to bring some clarity to that.
As we move on to the next, yes, we do have to move on to the next panel, but you wanted to say something, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I want to welcome all our visitors, all the visitors to this country, all, right? Particularly our brothers and sisters from the OECS. Now, I must also say I feel very happy personally hearing that the traditional farmers in St. Vincent and Grenadines are going to get the assistance of fencing for the area. That is important in at least two main ways. One is for security reasons, and we know our major social problem in agriculture in St. Vincent and Grenadines, predial larceny. The other is for health reasons, because as everybody in here would know, cannabis is now into the area of being a health plant. That is why we're having this medicinal conference. And if we look at what is happening in the USA right now as we speak, in a matter of days, we could hear them moving cannabis from a number one, where it is considered one of the highest illicit drugs, to a grade 3, where there are literally thousands of people with millions of dollars in their pocket ready to invest. So if we are not careful and move timely, next week we could see a boat come in one of our harbors with American cannabis and we can't do anything. Because that is the sort of hegemony that they push. But what I am saying to advise our two brothers there from Grenada and from Anguilla is that the OECS Central Bank have been having some workshops with a few traditional farmers throughout the OECS online. And we have done a good job so far. I big up the people who are doing that. And in Grenada, your own Dr. Gideon, as you would know him, right? They have proposed a production system which is sustainable and which is organic. And we cannot go the road of the old banana industry. We have to go the new road because cannabis products are now into food. So when you carry forward your legislation, make sure that the farmers utilize this practice of sustainable production and assist them as much as possible, so that we in the Caribbean could set an international standard for clean cannabis production. From where I stand, what I'm seeing here now is a rise in cannabis tourism internationally, and because we have the best climate in the world, we in the Caribbean, we're going to see that we have to get our share of that pie. Thank you.
The very last comment, Sybil Welch.
Good afternoon, all, and it's a pleasure to be here. I am Sybil Welch from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and as you know, we are a regulator in terms of the financial sector, as well as a monetary authority in terms of the EC currency. But we are also focused on development. And if you look at our agenda in terms of our articles, it specifies our statutes. It specifies those three things, both in terms of regulation, in terms of stability of the currency, and in terms of economic development. I think one of the things I want to talk about, or at least broach for consideration, is that we not look at cannabis in terms of a unifocus or mono aspect in our development architecture, consistent with the law. Because when we are asking ourselves, where do we want to be 5 or 10 years from now, we have to recognize as well that there's a lot of possibilities and potential, both in the cultural, in the spiritual, in the food and beverage, still consistent with the law. But for that, you need innovation and development. And for innovation and development, you need access. So if I am only able to just walk around with 2 ounces, it's not much exploration of innovation and discovery and research can be done with that. So why am I looking at a Netflix program that says cooking with cannabis when I have food and beverage industry and our culinary arts, which is so integral not only to our own personal lives, but to our way that we present ourselves to the world. And so we need to consider, while we want to be within the law, we should, because that affects our ability to trade with the rest of the world. But with our own laws, let us not put in a situation where we are not allowing for innovation, where our colleges can't explore our foods. It's fine to say we are talking about, I went outside, I saw some wines, I saw different foods. But what I don't see is the science behind it. So something tells me this has an X percentage. I'm not sure if it's X percentage for a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce. I'm not sure what flavors I'm getting from the terpenes. I'm not sure what science went into testing and exploring. But for that, you need capacity development, you need training. And therefore, I think it's important for us to think about the ecosystem that we are looking at in the agriculture, in the food and beverage, in the arts, in the spirituality, in the research and innovation, in the manufacturing, and a whole plethora of different pathways that converge into stability and growth. But if we're just focusing on, let us just focus on this end, or this pathway, when the rest of the world is focusing on a plethora of pathways, we do the same mistakes we went around when we went into bananas or sugar or cotton, or when we went into offshore or CBI, because we're not looking at it in a way that can allow us to see different pathways within the law to allow us to build industry, innovation, and creativity and development, and stability of our respective countries. So I think there's a need to be more expansive in our thinking, to inspire more innovation in our development, and to be more inclusive in the trajectory that we are pursuing. Thank you.
Well, I want to remind you, we can expect to hear a little more from Sybil tomorrow. Minister, if you could wrap up for us, please.
Yes, I'm really happy that my sister raised those issues, because in endorsing everything that was said and adopting it as my own, I mentioned in my address this morning that we should not go the way of a monocrop. We should advance a modern, medicinal, wellness industry, of which cannabis is only one part. I'll give an example. If you go into the pharmacy right here, just outside of the hospital, you can find turmeric capsules coming from the United States of America and coming from Central America. But we are just growing the turmeric and exporting the raw product. If you buy my house on a Saturday morning, I'm taking all my moringa leaves to feed my animals, and I am going to the store to buy my moringa capsules. In addressing the issue of a path that we took that I am not advising other people to take, within our medicinal cannabis authority, we fused research and development. But the Cannabis Authority is really a regulator. What we did was to burden the regulatory framework with research and development. And the next step has to be to free the Cannabis Authority of the research and development element, let them run with speed, because there are some conflicts that can arise when you are both the regulator and the one advancing the research and development for the same commodities. So I think that as we approach the discussion that you mentioned, that there is a need for a separate entity. And I heard one country I was speaking to said that they want to transition from a medicinal cannabis authority to an authority that deals with other commodities as well, psychoactive elements in those items. So there is a challenge there, and that is something that we are going to address.
Well, let's give this panel a big round of applause. And thank you very much, all members of the panel. As we proceed to the next panel, which we'll have the various regulators from St. Lucia, Jamaica, Barbados, and also from Antigua. checking to see if there was a representative from St. Kitts. We didn't want to embarrass them. But please, we'll start off by giving a little round of applause to my fellow CEOs from across the region. And we have the CEO. These individuals are going to introduce themselves. And they're going to be talking a little bit about what is taking place in their respective islands. These islands have gone through the process. They have established, and a lot of different things are taking place, and it's important for you to know what's taking place across the region. We have Mr. Regis Burton from Antigua and Barbuda. We have Ms. Shanika Otto, and you know, she has these hyphenated names, right? You know, from Barbados. I'm going alphabetical, you know. And then we have Miss Farah Blake from Jamaica, and we have Norbert Inglis from St. Lucia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say very little. I'm going to really let them talk, and we'll with Antigua and Barbuda. Please, let's go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Doc, thank you for having me. Once again, my name is Regis Burton, representing the Antigua and Barbuda Medicinal Cannabis Authority. It is a pleasure to be here, and definitely first and foremost to say congratulations to St. Vincent and the Grenadines for their second annual Cannabliss. So hats off to you, Doc, and for the great work that you're doing. In Antigua and Barbuda, we would have passed our regulation and our Cannabis Act in 2018, 2019. And then we all faced the 2020 COVID 2021. So our industry really started taking off and getting roots growing in the late 2021, 2022. To where we are now, we currently have what you could say the full operation, where we are growing medicinal cannabis, and you're also being able to access the medicine through a licensed dispensary. We currently have operational on our grounds 4 active cultivations, and we have 4 dispensaries, our newest just forming probably a month ago. For us, it has definitely been a learning experience, and I've always taken the chance to say special thanks to Jamaica, because if they didn't take this step and that risk in 2015, none of us would have been here. So I always like to say special thanks to Jamaica and also to St. Vincent, who came right behind them. Where we are, we're here. We're part of this Caribbean team that's being formed, because just like your minister would have said, the strength really is going to lie in the Caribbean unity. So from a small island perspective, we've really been champions of the importance of us working together as a collective. We've gotten the opportunity to see the struggles of a cultivation operation, the dispensary operation, the pharmacies, the doctors being a part of the process, and just holistically seeing the importance of education. So I'm sure more questions can be asked and we can pull things about, but for us in Antigua and Barbuda, we're pleased to say that we have a full cycle of a medicinal cannabis industry from seed to actually sale.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Farah Blake, CEO of the Cannabis Licensing Authority in Jamaica. First, again, just endorsing what Regis just said. Kudos to MCA and a wonderful Cannabliss. This is actually my first time in St. Vincent, and I feel right at home. We launched our legislation in 2015, so we are about 10 years old now. We have issued about 190 licenses. A quick conversation with some gentlemen from Jamaica, and it's so weird that I would have known of them by name, but never met them in Jamaica, and I met them here in St. Vincent. And we had a really interesting conversation about continuous engagement. We just went through general elections, and as you know, any time there's general elections in the air, some things like it comes to almost a grinding halt, but that is operational for you. We try our best, though, to keep our boards active within that period so that we don't stall the applications for licenses. We've had situations where we've asked our board to meet more than once per month. The corporate governance framework would have indicated that they meet once per month, but we asked them to meet more than once per month to facilitate the application and licensing process. One of the other things that we have done in the last maybe 3 years, we've done a lot of work on the application process to try to reduce it significantly. So we have a two-step approval process. One is called conditional approval, and that usually used to take about a year. And now we're proud to say that that process can take about 19 days. It was so good last financial year that we surpassed our target by about 26% for licenses. That's really about 7 extra licenses. But the fact is that persons who would have applied for licenses are now getting to that conditional stage much sooner. And so what is now required would be a site visit to ensure that your site is conducive to what the law says, and then the granting of that license. We've been challenged by differences in opinion about ganja. We've been challenged by bureaucracy, which I believe all of us have that problem. But we try to ensure that the areas that we can control, that we get past those areas pretty quickly. So we don't hold the licensing application. We try our best to schedule the site visits as quickly as possible. We have the responsibility to ensure that we observe all sales and harvests and so on. And we've gotten to a place now with our licensees where, because of this facilitatory approach and trying to ensure that we listen to their needs and be present for them, we've seen an improvement in compliance that is now an average of about 82%. So unlike, I think, most of the islands, we are under the Ministry of Industry. I notice quite a few of our islands are under the Ministry of Agriculture, but we're under the Ministry of Industry. And the directive from our minister is that we ensure that we facilitate ease of business. So the fact that it's ganja, it shouldn't make a difference. We facilitate ease of business. So we do a lot of operational overhaul just to make sure that it's easier for our clients to do business. And we're working on some new proposals to take a long, hard look at our legislation to see if it still holds, in the way it did 10 years ago, to see if there's anything that we can propose a change to. But all in all, we're growing. We had a slump in the COVID years, like Regis explained, but we have bounced back from that. And a lot of it has to do with the operational efficiencies that have paid off for us.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shanika Roberts-Odell. I'm currently the CEO acting of the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Licensing Authority. Forgive me, anybody who's heard this spiel before, but Barbados is what we like to call a conservative society. And henceforth, we have gone at this medicinal cannabis industry in as careful terms as we possibly could. Our legislation would have been passed in 2019. Our regulations passed in 2020. Our first dispensary and farm opened this year, if I'm not mistaken, in 2025. And then quickly behind it, our second. So if that does not tell you that it takes quite a bit of time to get sometimes where you're going. We have had 33 licenses, which represent 11 licensees, including the University of the West Indies, Cayfield campus, who has a research and development license. The reality of the situation is that I am extremely proud of where we've managed to come. That does not mean we do not have a significant way to go. In terms of how our legislation is established, I think we're about the only individuals who, after our legislation would have been passed, our regulations, we have made no changes to it since it would have passed, which has in fact caused us some issues in the context, but I've taken it as an opportunity is that we have had the ability to see the fullness of where there are holes and the fullness of where there are stumbling blocks. And we've made recommendations for the legislation to be adjusted, and that, as with most things, sits above me. We have truly made some strides towards where we want to be. Barbados is unique in that we do not allow for the smoking of cannabis. We do not allow for edibles. So, we allow for the vaping of medicinal cannabis. We allowed for oils, tinctures, creams, all that good stuff. But we do not allow for the smoking of medicinal cannabis. And so I know for some that is extremely frustrating, but I will see you back to the first sentence of my spiel, which is that Barbados is a conservative society. And hence we have had to kind of walk the thin line between the two groups. There are two groups in Barbados I love to talk about. There's the free up the weed crowd and the dash away the weed crowd. And I am sitting somewhere in the middle, holding everybody's hand, and we can get through this together. Somewhere through the middle, we're going to find a middle ground that works for everyone. And that's where we've been continuing to do. Now, is everyone happy? Absolutely not. I am sure that you will hear from some Rastafari brethren in Barbados who will tell you that they feel as though they've been left out of the industry, despite the fact that the industry in its totality is open to all, but there are license fees, there are requirements that come with cost. And so I understand from their perspective. There are others who feel that we have not gone far enough. As you mentioned, all over the world, there's a significant trade when it comes to food and beverage for cannabis. But in Barbados, we have tried our best to, let's get over this hurdle first, because there's still a significant amount of stigma attached to cannabis. There are many people throughout society in the upper echelons who may use it, but you have to see them admit to using it, whether they have a prescription or not. And so that has also, what are fair play usage? What are the conversations that we need to have amongst ourselves that perhaps, you may not need to do that here in this space. Some people will go in the middle of a fete and spark up. You have no idea how you're affecting individuals around you. And so there's a bigger conversation that has to be had. And in those circumstances, it then taints the rest of society who may be affected, who feel as though they don't want this to go any further because what they see as reckless use happens a lot. And so there's a conversation that needs to be had about how are we going to deal with, one, responsible usage, and then there's a conversation about know what you're using. Do people really know what they're using when they get it off the street versus what they see as government weed, which is the weed from the dispensaries? And so there's a lot more and a wider conversation that needs to be had in Barbados, and more doors and avenues which need to be open. And that is the reality of the conversation. But we press on as we must, and I think that we will come to a space that most Barbadians should at least be comfortable with, hopefully. Most. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I bring greetings from the sister island to the immediate north, St. Lucia.
There must have been more people in the whole of Jamaica who want to produce cannabis on a licensed platform. So please, help me understand this. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the legislation was passed in 2015, but the licenses themselves were not issued till about, I believe, 2017. When I spoke earlier, I would have shared that the process was very long. I wasn't with the Cannabis Licensing Authority at the time, and I'm going to say, based on my own experience, that the process itself was something that even the staff themselves were learning as to what is the best way to administer this application and licensing process. They would have had to create their SOPs just to ensure that everybody is acting within the law. It also stems from just people's ability and interest in cannabis. We've had a number of applications that have gone cold. They would start, they would get as far as conditional approval, and they would sit there for maybe 2-3 years. Some of them would start the process again. Some would just abandon it and maybe start some other business. And it might have been through frustration, it might have been through just wanting to do something different. But I believe that all in all, it stems from people's interest. We had a difficulty in the first few years. We had some issues with COVID. I believe we've rebounded well. And so that is why now we're seeing more of an interest. We also have suffered immensely in the public domain for not processing licenses efficiently. And so we have taken a lot of those complaints and we have fixed our internal processes. So as I said, in the last financial year, we would have seen about 26% increase over what we targeted. And I expect that we'll be seeing more interest in the illicit industry going forward.
All right, good afternoon. My question is actually to the entire panel, and it's just so that we can all hear from all of the regulators what programs or what policies, or do you have any plans in place, similar to the previous question, but looking forward, how do you plan to involve more small-time cultivators, more locals, etc. in the industry? Are regulators considering that? Is that something that you are planning for? And how are you moving forward with doing so?
So thanks for that question. In the case of St. Lucia, I would have referenced earlier 2 pieces of legislation. So we have our regulated substances cannabis bill, and we also have the drug prevention and misuse cannabis amnesty bill. The drug prevention and misuse cannabis amnesty bill speaks to an amnesty for individuals who would be currently involved in the trade of cannabis. So as it is drafted, the intention is that when that bill is passed, any individual who is cultivating or supplying cannabis can come forward and say, I am involved in the cannabis industry. Verification will be done, and an amnesty will be given so that your involvement in the industry will not subject you to any litigious process. You will not be arrested and charged, albeit we recognize that you were involved in the industry. From there, you will be deemed a legacy cannabis operator. All the LCOs have special treatment under the cannabis legislation. So the license fees, for example, for a cultivation license or a dispensary license are very different for an LCO than they would be for someone else. And there is also preferential treatment given under a mechanism that we refer to as our central trading entity. So unlike the other islands, having come in later and trying to ensure that the lion's share of the cannabis funds would have gone to St. Lucians, we have something called a central trading entity where every cannabis plant which is propagated in St. Lucia either is sold to that entity or royalties have to be paid to that entity for having cultivated in St. Lucia. Legacy operators have a right to be able to purchase into that entity. So the thinking is that if you are an individual who is currently a juggler and you do not have the financial wherewithal to set up a brick and mortar to establish a dispensary meeting the standards of what we recognize is required for the cannabis industry, but you can still get an amnesty, you can still be deemed a legacy operator, and you can buy shares in the CTE. If an investor comes into the country tomorrow and they have a market that they want to export to, they have the infrastructure in place, they have the resources, these individuals, when they come into St. Lucia, they will have to pay royalties to the CTE for cultivating in St. Lucia. And these same legacy operators will receive dividends from these investors having come in. So we've put in place that CTE concept and the legacy cannabis operator concept to ensure that there is some ability for these individuals, even if they don't transition into the market, to get that benefit. If they do want to transition into the market, then we have the concessionary rates for them to come in, and also special treatment. The minister has the ability to waive certain requirements for up to 2 years so that they can get that hand-holding into the industry.
So we currently have 2 amendments to our regulations. They have not been taken to cabinet as yet, but it gives, all right, let me start over. A few years ago, we did a program called Alternative Development. There were some challenges with that program, and so we went and revamped it. One of the pieces of advice that we received was for the program to be written into our regulations. When it's written into the regulations, it now becomes our operational plan. It means that you don't just start it and stop. It is something that is continuous through the regulator. So that program is going back to cabinet to be passed within the amended regulations. The licensees have asked for a number of things, and those things have been drafted in the regulations for it to be approved at cabinet in short order. The other piece of regulation speaks to display. I'm looking at these plans here, and I'm saying that if we're in Jamaica at a conference like this today, we could not display cannabis. The amendments to the regulation will allow for that. It will allow for short-term research authorization. So if you have a paper that you want to do that would require you going onto a farm and so on, you would be authorized through the regulator to be able to do that comfortably. And this is for actions or activities within our closed-loop system. So the licensees would have to comply to the terms and conditions of their license, which right now doesn't allow for that. So you could, after these regulations are passed, seek an authorization or a permit with us to be able to do that, to be able to handle cannabis for an extended period of time to facilitate your research. We have what we call a payment plan for persons who are unable to pay the license fees all in one. It is something that sometimes we put it on hold based on how much of the budget has been allocated for it. We found that it was significantly used, particularly after Hurricane Beryl. We also have the regulations, we have the deferment. I think that's it for now. Oh, there was over 100 sacramental spaces that were gazetted in 2023. That came as a second part to the amended legislation. And that takes care of identified and authorized spaces for sacramental use. I don't believe that was something that it was heavily talked about at the time, but we do have I think it's about 110 spaces island-wide that are declared for sacramental use.
What I will say on Barbados's end is that we already have certain things in place already. So we have a payment plan. We allow you to pay us 60% of your fee, and the 40% you pay over the first 3 years of your license, whether yearly, monthly, however you choose to do that. We've also allowed for anybody getting a Tier 1 cultivation license, we allow a blight. A blight means that your first importation you can have free. You don't need a license for it. You just tell us how much seeds or tissue culture you want to import, and we sign off on it and allow you to import so you can start off your cultivation without having to have an additional license. As it relates to projects and programs, have we developed several projects and programs? We have. Those are now with policymakers for them to make a decision as to what direction they would like to go in. So I cannot speak towards something that is not approved by my government at this point in time to see what they would like. And a lot of the conversation stemmed to, okay, if I give you a license, is that what you want? And the conversation extended to, well, you give me a license, but I don't have land. Give me a license, but I don't have the financing to do fencing. I don't have the financing to do X or Y. And so it has to be a broader conversation beyond that. The current state of our legislation does not allow for us to just give a license. And so a lot of legislative changes and cabinet approval is required before anything else can happen.
Quickly. Okay, so in Antigua and Barbuda, regarding programs, we specifically created programs to address the issues we were having. One would have been that we saw that there wasn't the great interest in local applications being made. Locals being Antigua and Barbuda citizens making the investment into industry. Why? The barrier was the cost of the process, the cost of the application fee, the cost of the license fee. We created what's called a collaborative grow program, which allows 5 Antiguan and Barbudans or more to form a company, and that company would receive an 80% discount on the actual license fees, along with some other incubator features where we usually would give a 2-year license, but instead for the collaborative license, you got a 5-year license, because we really want to hold their hands for 5 years to ensure that at the end of 5 years, they're a successful company. For us, we're a small island, so we're really big on companies being successful than too many, or a high pool of applicants, or a high pool of licenses issued, but down the road, the companies fail. Especially as local companies, we wanted to make sure that they were successful, and that the success you will see is reaped in the communities and it goes back to the families. So that was one way where we were able to get more inclusions of our very own investing into the industry. We also saw the need for support on the Rastafari side, where their inclusion in the industry. We made sure that just from a board level, that there's a member of the Rastafari community sitting on our board so that they play a part in the whole leadership and the direction in where we go. We are also looking at some futuristic things regarding research and development. What you're seeing is that a lot of the data and the research are not done from our region. And the data doesn't reflect people that look like me and you. The tests aren't done on us. So we would have offered a free research and development license for the entire year to help encourage people to get into that aspect of the industry. We also do like Cannabliss, Barbados, Jamaica, everyone. We also host a big educational conference festival because Spragga Benz and Beanie Man is going to capture the attention of the public, and then we're able to educate them and help break the stigma. So just like St. Vincent, we're using the entertainment as an aspect to capture your attention and then to educate you. We had issues, we had programs similar. How do you start? Where do you get your starting material? In Antigua, you're eligible to have 4 trees in your private dwelling. If I'm a licensee, I got my license, I'm now able to take my 4 trees from the Misuse of Drug Act and to bring them over as my starting material where I can then clone, cut, and get my industry up and running. So those are some of the programs that we currently offer.
I think that I'm expected to say something short about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Let me do that. You know, in St. Vincent, we actually provide all the traditional cultivators with a free license. They pay just an application fee of $100. We also provide them with an ID card, which is fully functional and can be flashed anytime they're stopped by police or anything like that, that they are licensed. And so we give their employees an employee ID card so that if for any reason an employee happens to be handling cannabis for their TC employer, they too are relatively protected. And the police recognize this. Let me say that we have been lucky in that we have in St. Vincent legal banking. Legal banking. And many of the TCs actually have a bank account that they can actually bank money. We did a special procedure with one of the banks in Canada and established a relationship. And so a big part of it is because the government was the major shareholder of the bank. So made a decision, a policy decision, that the bank should develop that legal banking. For other banks, because their governorship may be overseas or international, they couldn't do that. Your Scotiabank, your Barclays, or whatever you might have, they would have difficulties doing that. But we basically were able to establish it, and many of our farmers and so forth are able to move monies from Europe and so forth and things like that in a seamless way. However, they're not supposed to use US currency because of the federal restrictions you've been hearing about with the United States. Let me say that we believe in AD. You've heard about alternative development. So we've recognized that our farmers produce a tremendous amount of food. And it's not just cannabis they're producing food, dasheen, and stuff of excellent quality. And we've been promoting. As a matter of fact, in one area, we provided 100 acres of land to 49 farmers. And we hired a technical consultant, Mr. Pat Otley, just stand up a second there, to work with them so as to make sure that they're doing the right things and so forth. We've distributed seeds to them. When I'm talking about seeds, watermelon seeds and so forth. And the other day, I tasted some watermelon that I think many of you would die for. You know what I mean? And this was produced on these new lands that were distributed to these farmers. So in that way, let me say that we have a process here called tolerance. So even though we've worked with the police, and we have with meetings with the police, with the drug unit and everything like that, we give them, to be honest, a list of all the TCs who are licensed. We give the DPP a list. And anytime somebody says, the police, they call us and say, is this individual somebody who has just received or is pending a license? And we're able to say, this person is okay, this person is fine, and so forth. And they let that person pass. And in our laws and our regulations, all the major licensees have to purchase at least 10% of their products from traditional cultivators. There are many traditional cultivators who've been linked with various producers who've received checks for the cannabis that's produced, and that cannabis predominantly has been processed into oils and so forth, into various things. If any of you have looked at the chocolates and things that are out there, I'm not sure if that has come from TCs or if that's come from those direct farms before, but the CBD and the THC has really been produced from that land. Let me just kind of stop there, but let me say that we at the MC have consolidated a lot of our functions here in the country. So that whereas in some other countries, it's their Ministry of Health that deals with the INCB or some other division, we transfer that over to the MCA. And a number of other functions are under the MCA by law. And so as a result, we're able to consolidate and handle a lot of things in a holistic ecosystem and know exactly what's taking place. So I just really want to mention that we love our TCs, and we certainly want to promote greater small business. money is always a problem for persons looking to get into this field, but I think that this is something that may change very soon. Thank you. Some other questions? Yeah.
Hello. I'm a soil scientist from the Bahamas, but I have a question for the panel again. When you're searching, one, do you do any testing, whether that be pesticide testing on the final product of flour? Do you do heavy metal testing? You know, if you expose individuals to heavy metals, they can literally eat away at their joints. Do you have that in your legislation? If you do...
From the and I, that could really answer that question. We actually, when we first got our licenses really cost a lot of money. And we got a couple of investors that paid, let's say, $1 million for a license. I'm going to tell you this, right? And we decided we were going to use that money and invest in laboratory services. We constructed a state-of-the-art laboratory. We were able to get a particular company to partner with us to manage this particular facility, and they brought in the equipment. As a matter of fact, I should introduce Zavod. You know, Zavod is laughing there. He's the one with the mic. He is the individual who was running that lab for some time. Now, Zavod, stand up and let's see. You know, excellent laboratory technician, but he's now working at the Bureau of Standard. We've been making a few changes, and I think that within the next few weeks, the lab is supposed to be reopened and so. But in the past, a lot of the products were tested. We're able to test for almost 60-something pesticides. We're able to test for all the major heavy metals: lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, you know? We're able to test for at least 27 different type of terpenes. Sybil Welch was asking about that a while ago, as well as a range of not just THC and CBD, but CBN, CBC, CBG, and all those sort of products. This is very important. So as there has been export to Germany and those sort of places, these products were tested beforehand and evaluated. They're retested in those particular areas. One of the most important things is being able to test for bacteria using PCR, you know, technology. And basically the equipment is there, and we realize that the amount of testing being done for cannabis was too small to make the lab really financially viable. So you heard the minister talking about a medicinal industry with cannabis at its core. The lab now is going to be testing for a range of, in other industries, eggs. I don't think people realize the amount of pesticide that come in with your food, some of the vegetables and so on, all these kind of things. So a lot of those things will be testing. So the volume of testing is going up and making that lab a lot more financially viable. And we've certainly established a protocol. I mean, Regis was always asking about testing done from Antigua and so forth. We're going to be able to offer, I think, a number of those services. And I'm particularly proud of this lab. And testing is critical for you to be able to achieve international standards, as you said. Right.
So just to add, Doc ended, testing is critical to get to international standards. You asked the question about who determines what standards. You know, that's really where our interest, and I speak for myself and forcing it upon them, that's where our interest should now lie. What would be that regional standard that I can send my products to Barbados, receive from Jamaica, and put them on summer's shelf? So, but we're waiting on people like you to write that white paper and just give it to us to assist. So don't let the weekend end and you don't share something with us, because that's really what we want.
Yeah, greetings, SVG and everyone in the room. I want to ask a question. I am Emmanuel Alexander. I am the chairperson for the Caribbean Cannabis Fair Trade Working Group Public Relations Subcommittee, and we represent Latin America and the entire Caribbean region. Also, I am the vice president for the THC, the Herbal and Consumer Cooperative in St. Lucia. Going to harmonization. I'm aware that we have different islands and different authorities. What is in place within our authorities in the region when it comes to harmonization of legislation and common goals for the industry in the region? And I also want to ask, are we, the authorities, aware of cannabis and sustainable development goals? Because I heard the Prime Minister mention in his address this morning that a meeting with President Obama, and he stated that cannabis should be on its path by 2025 and legal globally by 2030. We are now in 2025, and I'm aware that we are supposed to attain the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, but here we are in 2025, and I'm aware that cannabis features in every 17 development goals. So I'm saying what the Prime Minister said, he's correct. He's not wrong at all, because the reason cannabis will be legal by 2030 is because it is the only biodiversity that is features in every single Sustainable Development Goals. And I want to finally say that what level of education we have in the region in educating the region people on the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
With regard to what is in place for harmonization, very often we see pieces of legislation come forward and we believe that it would have taken place over the last week or two. It actually takes quite some time. So some of the conversations that we've started to have as the authorities, as the Caribbean Cannabis Forum, is the precursor to having such harmonized stance. The conversations that would have been in the previous panel where the Minister of Agriculture spoke to his intention to bring it up at the OECS level, it is these steps that really are serving as a genesis for harmonized stances. Right now we have operated essentially in silos and we have segmented approaches to the regional legislation. But with these various courses of action, we do see in the future that there will be some harmonization among us.
And then additionally with the SDGs. So what you will find is that we all some way will chip away at some one of the 17. If you Google, you can find a paper that talks about cannabis being a part of all 17. But for example, Antigua isn't involved in the hemp. So we haven't started using the benefits of cannabis for industrial purposes. So we wouldn't really be able to check that. Our best practice is the fact that less than 2 years ago, we never knew each other. And we never had anything formal. But now we have something called the Caribbean Cannabis Forum, where we all agree to work together to ensure that we help one another.
Selassie, good evening to all. Greetings from Grenada. Dr. Thompson, you have cleared up something very significant here for me. As a member of the Rastafari Nyabingi House in Grenada, we have been clamoring whether our licensing program is under the amnesty bill. But I'm feeling quite comfortable St. Vincent has set the pace of the free licensing for all traditional farmers. I was about to ask this question. This is, I think, should be done not only in St. Vincent, but throughout the OECS, throughout the Caribbean, where the Rasta man has been suffering, has been robbed of his business for over 88 years now. We've been facing a challenge. Market, our levity, has been exposed to the dot due to that industry, which has a face right now, medical marijuana. Sometimes every day I ask myself, what is the difference between medical marijuana and marijuana or ganja, organically grown? We've been doing that for centuries before the implementation of that law in 1937. So I think we have to do some revision, especially around the Rasta community, to get some more clarity. St. Vincent, yes, you are going very good, but the other communities, we must have some regional conclusion. You know, I'm asking for that. We should form a declaration now where we have regional conclusion, because it seems some countries, some islands, running in front. It's not a race, because the colonial master will love to see us going on a race and we all crash at the end of the day. So we're calling for regional conclusion in the cannabis industry, where we could have not only St. Vincent having a lab, but we could have labs elsewhere which operate for all conclusively. The country may not able, Grenada may not able to finance all, but conclusively we could do it together, you know. So after 88 years, we're calling for conclusion. Conclusion, the free licensing, yes, we accept that. And in Jamaica, what was the fee for licensing that caused the Rasta people or the traditional farmers to really stay away? We're going to leave something for later on. Go ahead. I like the answer for that question. What caused the traditional farmers to stay away from? Is it the licensing was too expensive?
Thank you for that. So our legislation was in two parts, one for commercial and one for sacrament under, to pay respect to Rastafari as the religion, and the use of ganja for the sacrament. I can't speak to why the traditional farmers would have stayed away from licensing. I think a lot of what you just said a while ago would have been the feeling where traditional farmers are concerned, that it is something that you would have pursued for a number of decades, and that maybe you were not comfortable now paying for something that you would have benefited from, or you would have pursued between you yourself and your family. Personally, I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but from what you said, that is what I gathered. The new amendments that are coming out of our regulations will speak to the inclusion of traditional farmers. I can't speak too much on it because, as I said, it is before cabinet. But it will speak to the inclusion of traditional farmers through those programs that are now written in our regulations.
I think we'll just take two.
I just want to add one last thing, and I know they will all agree I'm the most dread Rasta one on the panel, other than the doc. But what I am seeing why traditional people are staying away is because when we give you that freedom for sacramental or allow you to cultivate at home, you get complacent, you settle, and you're just happy for that. But you have to remember you are fighting for something and the freedom of the whole plant. So when you just get a chance, I can grow my home, the police is not locking me up anymore, you're not looking at the fact that there's a bigger picture. So I want to remind everybody to look at the bigger picture. Don't just settle for the free license. In America, in New York right now, the first set of people who get a license are those who were criminalized. But what's happening now, they don't have the support to be a successful company. So the the authorities can easily say, yes, we gave you a chance. Yes, we helped out the Rastafari. You had an opportunity. But did you really have an equal opportunity?
Um,
Robust legislation, and I know Barbados also has in place a sea-to-sail tracking. So there's a closed-loop system where if it is that you are to steal cannabis, it cannot find itself inverting into the system.
In transition does not belong to no government in the Caribbean. No. It doesn't belong to no government in the Caribbean. It belongs to the people of the Caribbean, but what the administrators have to do is to facilitate the transitioning from illegal to a legal framework. And we are simply saying that we need to be part of all the transitioning in the dialogues. Reason is because we are the ones that know the know-how in cannabis. We are the ones that have the techniques in growing cannabis. But we were not given the chance. Now we've given the chance. We're saying, please allow us. Allow us to work with you. Allow us to work with the people of the country and be able to salvage pride. We're also saying that our recommendation is the reparatory justice part of what has happened to us before. We want to see that any incentives that come out of the industry goes back to the people that have been marginalized, especially in the remote rural areas. Because these persons have suffered from the hands of the police. Some have died, lose their homes, lose their farms. Some has had mental problems and challenges financially, because a lot of these traditional farmers, that's what our livelihoods were on, cannabis. That's what we used to send our children to school. But we didn't get that opportunity, but we still strive and we did it. Now we have lawyers, doctors, nurses that come from the Rastafari families. So our country should be proud of our contribution as a Rastafari community. We are ready and willing to work with any authority because we know the governments are not sustainable. But what we are going to do will be sustainable. The government is 5 years in, 5 years out. So they cannot own nothing than work with the people. Because I know what the governments or the administrations are looking forward is an X on election day. To be able to get that X, you need to facilitate the people. And I'm happy to see what the Labour Party in St. Lucia did when they came into office. In the manifesto, they said, the first order of the day in Parliament is to work on the transitioning, and they did. So they've gotten credit for that, and we've taken it thus far. But also what we did too, we stated that in our consultations that we would need to see that cannabis is regulated in St. Lucia on behalf of the traditional farmers through a central hub, a central unit. And that central unit would be the central trading entity, which the THC, the Herbal Consumer and Workers Cooperative, is piloting. Because we had the opportunity to be the city, but we realized that through financial constraints, it's not possible. But we also have 40% in that sector. So presently we have already formulated our presentations and the lobbying with the different stakeholders in St. Lucia in making sure that we propel this central trading entity. As our CEO said, that whether you farm or you don't farm, once you're part of that framework, you benefit. You don't have to be farming to make money off cannabis. You just need to register. You just need to be a bona fide cultivator. And that is where we did not leave the pushermen out, the people that sell cannabis. We don't only look at the traditional farmers growing. We also look at the person selling. Because these persons, that's what they did for their livelihood, to send the kids to school and whatever. So we need to give them that space. That is why the term came legacy operators. It would have been traditional cultivators, But because we brought in the pushermen on board, we call it legacy cultivators. So everyone in that space has that opportunity. So we say as traditional farmers and cultivators that we traditional farmers have to take ownership of the industry. And if we don't, the system will take charge of the industry for us. The ball is in our court. Let us play the ball and let us score the goals.
A really tough question to the panel. Only a few countries in this world have really legalized for recreational purposes. Canada, Uruguay, probably Thailand. A few others have established what they call cannabis clubs. Should the islands of the Caribbean, in your view, legalize, would it be advantageous to you as Rastafari or traditional cultivators to legalize for recreational purposes? Dr. Gofford, we started with that.
Yeah, give thanks. I should just maybe address both questions also. The first question was the challenges. And the challenges that you know, I would have had over time and even until this time proved to bring us to this part where we are right now, today, you know, being here. Some of the challenges, we have to remember that there was always a system of cannabis over the years. And there are ones, I who have maintained this system. So there is a system. And now there is now an highlight of the system of cannabis. And we see a couple of changes, especially in growing methods and all of this. These changes, you know, make it somewhat a little bit difficult that we can have these conversations. But the changes are sometimes good. And this is why I would love to encourage, especially our traditional farmers, to create themselves within a system. Create yourself within a system. Know what your challenges are. Know how to present your challenges. And when we know this, it is better for us, you know, to achieve what we want from cannabis in this time and times to come. You know, these are the questions maybe, you know, we need to ask. And I've spoken about trauma before, and that is one of the biggest challenge that I have even till this time. You know, when you are in a ganja farm, whether you have a license as a traditional farmer or, you know, you're just growing, you know, guerrilla style. If you see a police officer pass, that feeling still comes. That is a trauma, you know. And the bridge between and the whole cannabis industry as far as the governmental aspect of what's happening should be this. Let us address the trauma. And the trauma is a discussion. And while we are setting policies, have the traditional ones having a say into what the policies should have been and how can these policies work for them coming from where they're coming from, being where they are right now, and for the future. So these are some of the challenges. And if I should maybe address, you know, if there should be legalization of cannabis for recreational purposes within the Caribbean, there has always been. And I just maybe use cannabis freely across, you know, I spaces. And I think so, you know, I mean, you know, it will be more encouraging. And we can remember, and I've heard, you know, conversations before that, you know, if, you know, opportunities are there within the Caribbean region for I to do economically sustainable business as far as cannabis is concerned. You know, right across the spectrum of medical cannabis, of recreational cannabis, and sacramental cannabis. You know, there are opportunities there. And when we realize, you know, some of the opportunities will have been now tourism, some of the fluctuation of tourism which comes to Jamaica, which comes to St. Lucia, which comes to St. Vincent, which comes to Barbados, it's for our cannabis. It's for that naturally grown cannabis. It's that flavor, that equatorial flavored cannabis. They want that. You know, they're running from the whole bunch of cannabis that has been grown in California, that has been grown in Canada, and they come here. So that is a great opportunity, you know. So we have to take advantage of this opportunity while, you know, we have this relationship. We have the relationship between the traditional cultivators, meaning legacy cultivators and interested ones who have been following cannabis for many years, and the regulators of this time. There is a relationship, and we can live and exist together while developing each other, especially in the region, and we can see the benefits. So yes, you know, if there should be, we should have our cannabis clubs, we should have our legal, you know, cannabis, you know, ones coming from all over participating. And this is one of the examples of what's happening. I see cannabis out there. I know there is no regulation on these cannabis that I've seen at these booths and stuff. We get them for free. And we thank you, you know, St. Vincent. It is great to see that leadership. Yeah, give thanks.
Yeah. Now, you see, for legalization, you see, freeing up the weed totally on principle. My organization, the Cannabis Revival Committee, and me supports legalization, but let me take my time. Let me don't legalize overnight. Traditional cultivators have suffered too much with that. Let me see how much we can buy the pipers. We don't want it legalized one time. Because the money class, those who have the money will take it out of our hands. Give us the opportunity. Yes, open the door, legal door, for us to go. But to bring full legalization, that overnight, that will be more beneficial for the consumers rather than the producers. We are living in a society which is divided by class. We are living in a society where traditional growers are at the lower end. We ain't got no money. We ain't got what it takes to build a strong and vibrant medical cannabis industry. Who owns the dollars is going to call the shots. So give us the time. Let us galvanize ourselves together. Let us accumulate the monies first within the framework as it is now, before you flood it with everybody, and then we get it out. We don't want it so.
Yeah, Dr. Thompson, I like your question, you know. Personal, recreation, no. I don't term anything called recreational cannabis. I think cannabis should be personal use. We shouldn't have any term like recreation cannabis, because anybody that uses cannabis is using it personally. The person may be suffering from a trauma, an ailment, you know. So when I look at it, we're talking about recreational cannabis, I look at it as personal use cannabis. So we should kind of like distance away from the recreational cannabis and look at cannabis on a personal use level.
Well, I'm sure there's some questions from the audience. Zavon, you can help us again? He's gone. I wonder if, yes, I think there's some questions here. you know, my assistant. Please, thank you. But let me bring this one down.
Greetings all, and give thanks to our esteemed panel. I really like what I'm hearing. I am Queen of Sheba. I am a member of the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Board. I am also serving as the co-chair of the Caribbean Rastafari Organization. Kind of historic for the female entity, but my role is that of mom. My role is that of mother. I will be short and I will be brief. As it relates to cannabis, I would like for us, the Rastafari community, not to allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into just cannabis. We are cultural people. We are traditional people. Our food sovereignty must be inclusive of cannabis. Do not allow ourselves to have that separated. Access to land, access to irrigation, all of these are the things that we are looking at. All of these are the things that we must address. To my Rastafari community, it is time for some of us as elders, yes, we have to share our criticism. Yes, we must be there to give direction. But it's also time for us to make way for some of our younger Rastafari members. We have young Rastas now coming out of school, coming out of university. They're the ones who are sitting, researching. We even have some of them still hiding and growing some of the best color weed you've ever seen. And I'm speaking about the younger persons. I myself have a daughter who is a nurse, and she's also started to have training in cannabis administration. These are the areas that we need to address. And how will we do it? We have to organize and centralize. We have to have respectable, legitimate organs that can work with our governments, can advise, can share, and we must also be willing to learn. A lot of us women, we were the ones at home running behind with court money. We were not the ones going into the field, having the experience, the knowledge. It is our time. It is our time. We must step up too as the female entity and be part of this industry without apology and without fear. But we must organize and centralize. I give thanks.
Yes, Sister In. Love what you say, powerful. Rasbisha, I first want to big up the entire panel. Okay? Especially the brethren, well, everyone, but the brethren from Jamaica said something very, very important, that we have to work together. Anytime we don't do that, we're just wasting time. Because remember that the cannabis that is coming from outside the Caribbean into the Caribbean, and that's a fact, it's coming, it's not produced by individuals. Don't ever think that. Just like the food, it's not produced by individuals, it's produced by people working together. So for us to compete successfully against that, we must work together. I want to address specifically two issues. One that Brother Cottle said, in terms of the legalization, and he mentioned this to me many years ago. We always have this reasoning. And I could see clearly now where he's coming from, because with all the respects to our decriminalization, the traditional farmer has not reached the level where he or she should be right now. So we want to avoid those pitfalls. And I'm going to say a few things here, which I've said to Dr. Thompson, one-on-one in speaking, and which I have said to the Minister of Agriculture, and which I have said to the Prime Minister himself, and which a lot of traditional farmers said to me over the time, there are certain basic needs that we have to reach to a level where we could be competitive in this industry before that full legalization could make sense. One of them was addressed this morning in terms of provision of fencing. And what I'm saying, it does not apply to cannabis, as the sister said. It applies to agriculture, small farm agriculture. The farmer has to be respected, and the farm has to be respected. Right now in the Caribbean, food and cannabis, which are two of the most vital things right now in the region. They have to be, the people who produce them and add value to them have to be respected. And to respect that in a traditional sense means that you have to provide a traditional farm family, not just the farmer, because the farmer's family and the farmer's community. With security, that when he goes or she goes to sleep in the night, you know when they wake up in the morning, they're finding what goods they have. Whether it is food or cannabis or whatever. They have not, that fear is not in them. So remove that high possibility of pre-deal larceny or organized crime. Secondly, in terms of our provision of water storage and distribution facilities. We just came out of a September that will be a record in the Caribbean for terms of heat and lack of water. So in the months that we have excess rain, we must be able to store that water. And we know that, I know that in St. Vincent in particular, the majority of farmers who use water, especially in cannabis growing, do not use the municipal pipe water because of the chlorine. They use the rainwater or spring water. Thirdly, we need to have facilities for curing and drying, which are of the highest level, because we are into an internationally competitive economic space. So we must produce quality goods. Never mind the quantity, but the quality must be there. Right? And I'm just speaking for St. Vincent, I'm speaking for the entire Caribbean. And there must be a fund put aside. The governments have to put a fund up where traditional farmers on application and request could draw from that fund easily without any much red tape to buy the inputs they need to produce at least the first crop. After that, they will generate an income. But there must be some husbandry or some care during that first period to get our farmers up to that level where they could be able to hold their own. And while we are doing this, to the point that the Jamaican brethren made again, we have to organize and work together. Can't do it any other way. So I just want to hold it there.
Yeah, Rasbishai, I acknowledge your question when it comes to security, because my main concern with the cannabis industry in transitioning is security because of the pre-deal larceny. Now, we are les enfants as traditional farmers. We don't have to rely on the administration for every means of facilitation because we have our own work to do. Because security would be part of our job. But how many of us have set up an apparatus when it comes to security? Very few. What I did, I rescued a Rottweiler pit bull, and I also got a German Shepherd Rottweiler, a male and a female. And the first thing I said, okay, security is paramount. I'm going to set up a canine security firm, and I bred my dogs. I left St. Lucia in my house in the care of my son, and is now taking care of my security guards for me. I have 5 young puppies. I'm training for security because I do not rely on the government or anybody to provide security for me. I realize there is a trend in the region and I don't see the apparatus working because I realize some security companies have old dogs. Dogs they don't give any love to, they don't care them, but they make money off them. I turned the other way around. I breed my dogs, I'm training my dogs by myself, and that my dogs live in my house. They live in the house, they are well trained, and these are my securities. Don't bother come in. There is one in the room, there's one in the living room, there's one in the balcony, there's one upstairs, and they are doing their work. I said I have paid money buying food for them. Now they have to go and work to maintain themselves. And I'm looking forward to set up that security apparatus around the Caribbean. Yes, because we have to take the first step. Also, when we look at what you mentioned about, Sister mentioned about the security of food, there's nothing called food security. We cannot secure food because food is perishable. The only thing we can do is add value to the foods and give them some more shelf life. Yes, that's very, very important. When we look at cannabis cultivation, cannabis is a heavy feeder, just like tomatoes. So after one cannabis crop, you cannot do a second cannabis crop the same area. You have to do the crop rotation. That is why in St. Lucia we did not set up a cannabis fraternity. I told my brothers, no. If we do, we marginalize the country people. Reason? Not everybody is in favor of cannabis, but everybody wants to use or tamper with cannabis. But everybody wants to use herbs or tamper with herbs. Reason? 70-80% of medication prescribed by the physicians are from herbs growing in rainforest areas. That's a multi-billion-dollar business. Essential oils are also a multi-billion-dollar business. When I put the two on the scale, I have weighed a multi-trillion-dollar business for my country. We can never go wrong. We need to start growing our economies from within the country and within the Caribbean, not from external shocks. Because we took lessons from the pandemic. So we're now in post-pandemic. So what we need to do, we need to be more advanced. We need to have food sovereignty. Because we'll be doing cannabis sustainably. So we do crop rotation, integrated pest management. Now for farmers that do not have the means for greenhouses, especially when it rains, to secure their cannabis, they also have a lucrative crop because they will not be dependent on cannabis alone. You need to cushion the industry. Very, very important for us and for the farmers. We must. Because if we don't cushion the industry, the farmer has nothing. What the farmer needs is to bring money and put food in his pot the same day. That's what the farmer wants. Just go to the market, sell, and put food back on his table. So we have to have the mechanism in place to do that. And once we do it right, we will not suffer. We will have plenty food. Because once you grow cannabis, you do integrated pest management, so you have your herbs for essential oils, culinary herbs, then you have your dashin, you have your plantain, your crop rotation. You miss nothing. So even though you don't have a crop of cannabis, you always lucrative, you always have food. So that is the direction we need to go, traditional farmers.
So if I could just share quickly two things. One is a comment on something I learned earlier today. I don't know who was on the stage speaking, but there was an interchange between Rastafari and traditional farmers. And an elderly lady next to me, she's a pharmacist by profession. She says, even her mother has been using cannabis for years. Her mother is not a Rasta. And I got the message from that she doesn't want us to mix traditional users and Rastafari brands. And where there's supposed to be separation, be mindful of that. So I'm just sharing that information to you because it was wise counsel to me, and I hope it adds value to you. But my second question now would be to Attorney. Could you share with us the recent historic win that you had, but give us advice to the government, which is like the political government, and also advice to the Rastafari government. How could we have avoided getting to that stage?
All right. Yes, Regis, give thanks for that. And yes, it is important to focus on Rastafari. You know, we say Rastafari and Grassroots Ganja Association because we always say that while the Rastaman was being persecuted, is our grassroots family and neighbors who continue to plant and hide and supply us with sacrament. So we now leave out our grassroots family, but we know Rastafari have certain rights under the law that we want to certainly exercise, you know. So in terms of, I think, you mentioned the recent case. We've had some cases in Jamaica recently where Rastafari ones continue to be arrested, you know, and charged and put in court for possession of ganja. And I think that the law itself is not so clear, you know. When you look at the Jamaican law, our law really had a framework for medicinal, which is the CLA. It have a therapeutic, which they say was Ministry of Health. It have a spiritual, which they say was Ministry of Justice. And then it had also the Ministry of Industry and Commerce involved as well too in the, you know, business aspects and so forth. So the Rastafari part of the law now did not say, like how it says for the research by the universities, that all laws applying criminally to the Rastaman are exempt. But I see the law says all laws applying to medicinal research is exempt, right? And so I think that the laws in Jamaica and the region still don't really appreciate the Rastafari role and the need for reparatory justice, you know. I think the view is that the Rastafari is being given a privilege, you know, as if it's something that we have not already paid for and died for, you know. And so I think there was a caution, a very cautious approach, because then say, you know, Rastafari somehow in certain minds is still linked with criminality and talk about the black market and inversion and so forth. So the Rastaman rights was curtailed and cornered in a part of the law that only supposed to allow for smoking in your place of worship, you know. So most of our laws say Rastafari can't earn from the herb, can't sell the herb, you know, and we're saying that if you appreciate properly the relationship of the Rastafari community to ganja was never about smoking alone. It was always about a multidimensional relationship involving therapeutic, spiritual, cultural, medicinal at the core. If you ask the Rastafarian graduates across the Caribbean, is ganja sent many of them to school, college, university, and to the CLA and the MCAs of the region. So we can't leave out the economics of the Rastafari. We can't allow to have one think that Rastafari ganja is somehow not legal. Because we also hear that if it's not medicinal, it somehow is illegal. And so everything that is non-medical becomes black mark. Because we're continuing to criminalize the very foundation upon which we have now a regional cannabis industry. You know, so we're saying that the law should have firstly recognized, as I heard you say earlier, legacy first, right? As we have in New York and New Jersey, those who have criminal record is on the priority list for licensing. In the Caribbean, it's the other way around. You have to have a fit and proper person, a clean criminal record to get your license in the Caribbean. You know, so our framework should have had the law first and foremost recognize all of the grassroots Rastafari traditional cultivators who have been criminalized for so much decades. Legalize them first and empower them first before you go to Canada and USA and university and these sort of situations. Legalize, recognize, empower our Rastafari and grassroots upon which this industry is built. So if you had done that, our law would have said Rastafari is exempt from the criminal law, but it only allows for possession exemption. And when you ask the police in Jamaica, they're saying, oh, well, where is the Nyabingi? So they're saying if you aren't going to a Nyabingi, they're saying you aren't entitled to travel with your herb. So we continue to have these cases of one being arrested for ganja because the police say you don't have the right as a Rastaman to possess this ganja because you don't have a license from CLA and you aren't going to any Nyabingi. So I think the law should be clarified around those things that Rastafari have the inherent right, the constitutional right. You know, our Minister of Justice, Mark Golding, who passed this law in 2015 then, right, had said that he, although the INCB said to him, be cautious about the Rastafari component. He said he cannot decriminalize if he does not recognize the constitutional rights of the Rastaman. And so we're saying the law needs to do that as well too. Don't keep it out there and call it only in our church or a temple or the tabernacle. We want to be empowered fully, right? We want to be able to open a bank account in St. Vincent, right? And and St. Lucia. We want to be able to build our industries in Jamaica, St. Vincent, Antigua. We want to be able to have interregional, Rastafari, and grassroots, ganja, trade, and commerce as well. Not only in the buds, but in the products, the oils, the lotion, the creams, the eye drops, the ear drops. We want to be able to know that Rastafari and grassroots ones are at the core of the regional industry. Yes.
I know we could take a couple more questions there. A lot of what you said there, let me just correct you. It's St. Vincent. If you have a criminal record, we have it. That allows you to get a license. Yeah, I know. I was going to say that. But tomorrow, I know we are going to have one of our speakers, Macau, talk about what happened in 2020. In 2015, the INCB may have said certain things, but in 2020, they decided to remove cannabis from the list of drugs that has no medicinal properties. And there's a special schedule, Schedule 4, in the treaty that says that you could only use cannabis for medicinal purposes or for research. Now, whether a country decides to adhere to that or a country decides to literally kick the door down, that's an issue. And I think that, you know, this is something you may be touching on tomorrow as part of what you're presenting. But I think there's a lot you said there to Troy, and I really appreciate it and so forth. I think are there some last questions there? Yes, Pastor.
Okay. I was debating whether to talk about this, so since you brought it up, let me go back to a previous point about the legality of, or the question of recreational, so-called recreational use versus so-called medical use. And let me preface it by saying that I agree with what you said. The ideological position that you laid out is very good, but the legal situation is different. So for medical cannabis, because of the fact that cannabis was put in the treaty, there is a very straightforward framework for trade at the international level. You're being held back from it in large part. I think, Dr. Thompson, you're right. The United States and its prohibition is actually in some way holding you back from participating in a true world market where cannabis products from St. Vincent, from Jamaica, from St. Lucia, others would be able to compete on the marketplace of cannabis products around the world right now. And that's allowed, and that's provided for not so much in the treaty over in Vienna, but in treaties in Geneva around world intellectual property, treaties like the Convention on Biological Diversity, more recently on GRATIC, the Genetic Resources and Associated Traditional Knowledge Treaty that we just passed a little bit over a year ago. But the bottom line is that cannabis is legal for adult use or personal use or recreational use. It's legal for medical use. But if you want to participate in a world market that has all kinds of things already set up to protect you and to protect the market and to allow you a path to market, then it's medical. If you want to do adult use or personal use or recreational use, it's perfectly allowed, but it's more of a local policy. It would be under exemptions in the treaty for non-medical or non-scientific use. It's either non-scientific, non-medical, or it's medical and scientific in the black and white, no gray area, four corners of the international law. But you can set up local policy, whether that's throughout the one country or the region. I'll leave that for my governmental friends to figure out, but it's certainly not going to be as easy to set up international trade for other than medical or scientific purposes until we remove cannabis from the treaty. And we won't remove cannabis alone from the treaty until we remove the pillar drugs that were written into the treaty in 1961, cannabis, coca, and poppy. And those are a package that will come together free the plant and bring us back to at least that point in our timeline. But if you want to learn more about the history of the placement of cannabis in the treaty, what the removal from Schedule 4 means, what the World Health Organization's position was, which I think it was what drove the change in St. Vincent, wasn't the change in the treaty, it was a change in the position of the World Health Organization, which is equally dramatic and less talked about. So I'm happy to talk about that. I'm so pleased and honored to be invited, and much respect and love for you all.
Any other questions from the audience, or you wanted to? Yeah? You wanted to say something? Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? We've had the final question. Greetings, greetings. Yes. Let me. You just arrived.
Just arrived.
Just arrived. Sorry, he's rushed it. Just arrived. He was actually supposed to be. Let me. Oh, you got a chair there? Yes. Supposed to be on this panel, but a few persons delayed. Please go ahead. And then
I want to
wrap up.
say hats off to Dr. Thompson, and I want to commend Dr. Thompson on his professionalism, his courage, and the work that he has done. Because I was here for Cannabliss Festival in November. We went on the trip to Chateau Belle. I met a journalist. I said to him, I need to get some stories out. He linked me with the Guardian newspaper, and the Guardian called I. But to my surprise, the first article that came out for 2025 was in collaboration with the Cannabis Medical Authority of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Caribbean Cannabis Fair Trade Working Group, Public Relations Specialist myself. And it was just simple. Before we think about international trade, let us first look at the national trade of cannabis, the regional trade, because we're not able to satisfy nationally, neither regionally, but we're running internationally with all this red tape. No, we're losing out. We need first to service national, to know we have enough herb nationally in all the islands and in the region. And I like Brother Thompson for that support, because he knows the direction that we have to go with the industry. And what we are going to recommend is that, remember the cocoa and coffee era and also the sugar era. We exported the raw product, and what happened? They sent it back to us refined. I was in Mauritius in 2012. Attending the 7th regional briefing of small island development states in economy, vulnerability, and opportunity. We don't own the economy, we're vulnerable, but we have opportunities. That's one of the opportunities. We are not going to send an ounce of cannabis internationally. No. Branded. Branded. We send nothing out for you to refine and send back to us. No. We do all the work, all the branding, and we send it to you branded. If you want to smoke cannabis, what you do, you book an airline. You come to the Caribbean, any island, you book your hotel, you book your taxi, you go to the restaurant, you go to the market, you patronize the people, smoke cannabis, and go back home and come again. That is the direction we're moving. That is the direction we're moving. Because we are going to safeguard the industry for the traditional farmers and the people of the Caribbean. And I'm going to say it again, America is becoming a dictatorship. We all know that. That's what it's becoming. And we are aware of that. So we're taking the rigid stance to say that we want to solidify the Caribbean. We have enough resources in the Caribbean to manage and to stop our administrators from borrowing from the international banks. Let's be sustainable.
Sorry, I think Emmanuel just lost his visa to the United States. We're going to ask.
Greetings, one and all. My name is Abidan Tafari. I must say, the sister that runs the CLA in Jamaica is here. Just wave your hand for me, please. All right, give her thanks. I'm going to say this, and when I speak, I really don't give two knockers where one thing. I just say it as it is. So, firstly, you have a thing when you have demand and supply, and that is economics. That is basic essence of life. So, we have ones in the wider space in the region who don't really plant ganja or plant a certain standard of ganja. No disrespect to them because it is what it is. So in the case of demand and supply, like a space like Barbados, seeing, because I've been to your country, you don't really plant herb and it's bare imported stuff. Take some herb from places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Jamaica and Dominica, and we are the ganja planters them in the space. Demand and supply. It's simple. Trade monks with self. And I'm going to tell you this. The next thing you have to look upon is stop the fancy talk about, we have to follow certain rules and regulations. Cut that. Kick that to the curb, Aya. A foolishness that. All are we living in the same space. So we need to start link with each other. And I'm going to say this, is Rastafari have to be the head. As in, it has to be the spearhead. And that is the way you move through all the idiosyncrasies that Mr. Man and him friend them set up to run, feed them cannabis business. You see, when I talk about ganja, and I don't really talk about cannabis. Because that's one something where some guys and them friend create and have literature for go with that and a bag of Ray and Tay. Is ganja I deal with. I no disrespect our ancestors. I no disrespect my grandparents. I just work with the thing as it originally is. Our origin me deal with. Me deal with etymology. Me go straight to the root of the thing. And it's simple. The privilege that has been given, that has been earned by Rastafari, and we are sovereign indigenous people, each of the space like Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Jamaica, Dominica, you name all the beautiful islands that we have here in our region. We have Rastafari in the space. And it is the Rastaman right, or the Rasta woman right, or is Rastafari right to ganja. We are the only people that has been abused for it. So we get the right to, the UN, and, you have drip. So me I say, as a matter of fact, right beside me, seated here, is the representative, the legal representative for all the indigenous peoples across the Jamaican land space, Dr. Marcus Goff. But to I, is not really Dr. Goff, I just Ras Marcus. See? But the essence of what I'm saying is, we need to link and work. Mama CLA, no disrespect to you, Miss Blake, we have spoken before on the phone. If you remember, my name is Abidan Tafari. I will reintroduce myself off stage, yes, and we will reason some more. But what I'm saying is, you need to work with the Rasta them in your space. You need to work with your traditional farmers in your space. The ones them where grow the good, clean ganja, the medicine. And medicine we have, And it never does become medicinal because we're here selling medicinal cannabis. And that's the only, no, ganja medicine from day one. It make that way there. Creation, I rate it that way. It don't I rate no other way. So stop go around. Nobody follow them guys' policies because I know our representatives have to go to Washington, D.C. and sit down and smile with all sorts of people. And we're not knocking you, we understand that is your job, but please respect the sovereignty where your indigenous people have and work with it, build it. And then we trade amongst each other, as me say. A place like Cayman, them no grow ganja. You need ganja, you buy it from we, I and I. And when I say we, I mean all I and I. Who are the producers? Because it's a business. We create and we trade. You get me? I say it is that simple. It's not hard. Whatever nuances there, I can all the that is in here, the ones who are responsible in their various spaces, I can work it out. It's not something that's hard or difficult. And this is what I am championing. You hear the hygiene say, me Einstein say, we need for service for own a region. And I can tell you this, via facts, scientific proof, that our DNA structure is totally different from other people's DNA structure. No disrespect to them either. And you know, or listen, you see that is something that you have in a bag of strain and whole heap of strain. You hear it sound similar to pain because you're straining. Go forward to your original thing. Go forward to your original strains. That is where the medicine is. A 10-year-old youth who have epilepsy, when need ganja, you need the original ganja we have. We only come with what? 10% THC. A medicine that I talk about. Healing. Facilitate the process of healing. Because that is all who practice healing, whether you use bush or you use them technology. You know, you can't really heal no one, you know. You done design already with that. So I'm saying, we have all the things that we need to look after our citizens within the region. We should utilize it. Let me give you a joke. Here's a little bit of difference. Fact. Right now, Vincent is and in Vincent, we are on volcanic soil. Henceforth, the ganja will come from Vincent have all the volcanic minerals in it. I want brand that by itself, you know. I mean, a medicine that where I'm from is limestone. Saying, yeah, me have a volcano there. It's not as active or vibrant as the one that is in Vincent, but me have a volcano same way. Saying, but the thing is, the minerals that are in the soil that we have there in Jamaica is not the same minerals that is here. And you can tell that by, anybody who come from Jamaica can tell that by the food. It tastes different. No matter how much you use the season, it tastes different. That means the herb we have in Vincent, the herb we have in Dominica, the herb we have in Jamaica is going to be different. These are just facts. And I'm saying the medicinal properties of all these herbs varies, but it is for I people. And others will join in because we have what them want. I mean, I say, the birds in them, we are do them thing, we are run them thing, not legally, but under the corporation. I'm just saying, you see the great thing about Vince is, them facilitate a type of vibe where they must say, yo, you're a traditional farmer, forward. We can work together. We can work together. And that is where I'm at. Let us build with those who are in the space and get the thing going. Hard. So, I would say, if you run a boat, go up so, round so, or down so, stop running a boat. Come in, make a work with those who understand the nuances and make you do it legally. You benefit more from that. Instead of you risk your neck, run a boat, go so and so. This is where I'm at. And I know that, all the brethren them here are, in the same vibration. So I'm saying, let us pool efforts, work together, and save our own people. Because if we can't save ourselves, we can't save nobody else. Because it looks stupid for me to tell you about health, I'm not healthy. Don't it? Yeah, so make us work together and make it happen. Hard. Right now, I don't like to leave here and say, the next few months from now, we can share some of the ital ganja we're growing in Jamaica with the ones that are Barbados and the ones that are Cayman and all about the different spaces that don't grow ganja. It's simple. Demand and supply. You are a consumer, be yourself. It's easy. It's not hard. And I can tell you this. The Europeans and the Americans and all other nations across the planet want what we have. They will come here for it, value of it. So I'm asking all the ones who are in the responsible positions of ensuring that their nation does what it needs to do. Work with your people, you know, please. And stop make some outsider people when are living in your space tell you how to live. They don't need to work together. That's all me I say. Make it work. Dr. Thompson.
You could tell when a man has just gotten off of a plane and he's fired up. You know what I mean? Yes, but you know, I'm sure he said a few comments there may have ruffled some feathers, but I don't think so. But let me just say, right, that there's a bus going back to the hotel at 6:30, right? And then another that goes back at 9 p.m. We want to kind of finish this up so you could go and get some last few minutes of the expo, you know? I feel like some soursop, maybe some passion fruit juice or something like that, you know, maybe some ital. I feel I need a fortification. And tomorrow, the hotel is going to, the bus is going to be leaving the hotel at 8 a.m. at the latest 8:30 to get here. Doctors who will be talking about their Vincentian experience in prescribing, right? Then we have John Walsh, who's going to be talking about what's going on in America, the subject of intersay, of interregional trade. And we also have Sarah David from Coppola GIZ. There's somebody from the United States, somebody from Europe. We get in those perspectives. And then we're going into a new realm. We get in Mr. Michael Krawitz and so forth. And we're having Daphne Elsme and Iko Washington. Their group is going to be presenting just in the afternoon. We're having a PN Metal flying in a little bit like and so forth. And she's coming in from the Netherlands. And then we're having a special workshop for the TCs on the do's and the don'ts by again Macali Manage to wrap things up for the day. I got to say Macal. Sorry about it. I got to say Macal. I say Macal. They want me to say Mashal. You know what I mean? I said, but I think we would just do a 2-minute roundup before we leave. I know you had some more questions and so. What was it? Okay, it's not really. We think we're finishing up here and a team is going over to the hospital. You see, I tell you, across the region, I think we're lucky in St. Vincent. We have the support of our CMO, a Chief Medical Officer. Across the region, sometimes the Chief Medical Officers in the medical community are not so much on board. Yes, Sam? And so we have the speaker tomorrow from her is the medical officer of health. He is a prescriber. And the moderator on the panel is Dr. Davy. She's an infectious disease specialist. She presented last year. So we're pretty happy. But there's a good portion of the medical doctors here still in St. Vincent again who are skeptical and so forth. So we are taking the conference over to the hospital, to them. And this conference is still going on. You don't have to follow. Although if you speak to me, you could probably come over and so forth. Right? But we're speaking on a special subject. There's a researcher out of Bermuda who is going to be doing a lecture, but they're doing it online and so forth and things like that. So we're using all the technology. Anyway, I'm taking up too much time. I think the speakers here want to do a 2-minute wrap-up. 2-minute wrap-ups are not always 2-minute wrap-ups, but Doctor, if you could go ahead, wrap up, and then I want to get some soursop juice. I want to get something like that. Do you fault me for that? Do you fault me for what I get at? Yeah. It's not that I'm putting the conference down. It's just that I'm a little dry. I'm a little dry here today. I need to fill up the tank. Please go ahead.
Yes. Give thanks again. Give thanks, for, ones who are here and, still listening. And it's very important even for Rastafari and grassroots and traditional and medicinal family, the ganja family, to be together in this time, to be, celebrating the ganja within itself. I do give thanks for that. And I just want to, highlight, especially to the traditional farmers, there are standards that have been observed, especially in this time. And I'm sure that, we have been farming a certain way over time. There are a whole lot of, obstacles that has been in our way over time. But, as Doc here had spoken about, one of our colleagues, Marshall Emmanuel, is one of our scientists that has been supporting the Rastafari community over time. And with that said, we have gone into a deeper science of how I can, support our ITAL grown cannabis, not to be including of, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, and all these things. And we are now creating a standard which we call the ITAL standard. And this, we want to establish amongst ourselves. It's, going to be there for use for, different communities who are interested. So a standard which can match that of, a standard where medicine can be produced in a clean basis. So we have products that can use as insecticides, products that can be used as our fertilizer, which are free from all chemicals, and these are ITAL products. So we are in the development of this. And I know that there hasn't been a central reasoning amongst, especially the traditional growers and the Rastafari community, amongst the Caribbean and amongst myself. But we are looking forward, especially within the Rastafari organization across the Caribbean, to send more messages and have more relationship that I can, support what the causes are and offer what we are doing there in Jamaica. Because we are doing some great studies, just to formalize our central organizations and to establish our standards, which is going to be required. And we are talking about products, and products has to have a standard. You can't put out a lotion and it look a different way the next time you put it out, or it feel or smell a different way when you put it out the other time. It have to have a formulated standard. So we are working on that, and I want the ones them, just to identify that, recognize that, and work with a central unit. I mean, we know communities at times are fragmented in for different reasons. But for the reason of cannabis and for I community to move forward, and especially to save our youths. The youths are drifting. A whole lot of youths are going in different directions. So we need to save our youths, traditional people, traditional farmers, save them youths by looking deeper into how the science can work. The youths them want to work with robotics. The youths them want to work with drone systems. So you put your farm out there, the youths them can program to make a robot fix the farm right, if that's the case, or do certain things as far as the technologies are concerned. So let us include our youths and create and develop ourselves within standards, So that is my final words. I do give thanks, for all the ones that, have participated so far. And, we are looking forward for this to happen next year again in a more advanced way. And we are looking forward that when we in Jamaica have our conference, all the ones in the Caribbean can be represented. Give thanks, love and respect.
Now, in wrapping up, on principle, my organization, which is a traditional grants organization, support full legalization. But we have to be careful how we proceed. We have to be very tactical. We have to be very strategic. Otherwise, we could lose everything. This is capitalism. The money class will take over. We don't want that. We have to make sure that the traditional cultivators and Rastafari are properly placed in a position where they could earn dollars, are in a position where they could use their medicinal cannabis in a very free way. Bring it back to its former glory and let us proceed. We cannot afford to bring this thing at this stage and lose it. Thank you very much.
Yes, I want to thank each and every one for the patient hearing. I want to thank Brother Thompson for such an opportunity. And I want to say lastly that I want to reiterate that not only medical doctors are going to prescribe under that new regime. Before there were doctors, hospitals, and nurses, but the nature was the great healer, and we have our indigenous culture and our indigenous rights. So I thank you all.
Yes, thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thanks to the panel and to the host and to Cannabliss SVG. I want to thank all of our regional regulators. You know, I see you're here trying to work with us, listening attentively. I want to thank all of our Rastafarian grassroots, ones who are gone, many of them underground, in prison, you know, not here with us now. Give thanks again for all of those sacrifices, you know. I want to say also that we need to look at, as we say, internal economy, internal patience, internal structuring, and I think that's where we have fallen short sometimes, because we're trying to see now this foreign currency and the Canadian dollar, and that is the objective. That should not be the objective. You know, when we look at, for example, Jamaica, we see how the Jamaican ganja economy alone internally can make so many ones wealthy if properly structured. We don't need to rely on foreigners. So I'm saying that let us build our internal Rastafari structures, our community organization, exercise our rights that have been suppressed for generations. We can empower our grassroots community to continue growing, to do research, technology, our youths, but we'll be able to serve our national and regional needs before we start to structure ourselves to fit into a foreign objective, a plantation economy. We need to have a new paradigm for ganja autonomy based on self-determination. Thank you very much, Prof. Very much. Yes, sir.
Greetings, one and all. I'm just going to say this because when ones forget them flowers, them forget them flowers. First year when I came here, so first year in Rastafari terms mean last year for everybody else. So at the first staging of this Cannabliss festival, I was here, and at that point in time, none of the traditional farmers from St. Vincent and the Grenadines were giving ganja farmers got any grants. You know, after burial and the volcano smash up a whole heap of things. And you know, after reasoning with Tyrell Map and even Soboto, we kind of work out a thing where the ones them are now getting grants to grow ganja. And you don't only grow ganja, you grow food. Because you can't grow food for the brain and not grow food for your belly. And I'm just saying, here it is, that a government take it upon themselves for work with them traditional farmers, the people under Rastafari, the ones them with that other nations has shunned. I'm want to say Antigua, big up on yourself, because you go and go with the phone Rastafari community. See? Yeah, Regis, big up. But what I'm saying is, here Dr. Thompson is on the stage and he's a part of giving, giving grants to the farmers to grow herbs and grow food. And I'm saying, we can all learn from each other. That is where I'm at. Selassie the first. Dr. Thompson, big up yourself.
Thank you very much. Let's give another big round of applause to the audience, to the audience, and also to this panel. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.